Ever wondered what's really going on behind the scenes when your flight's taking off from somewhere really hot, like a desert tarmac in the middle of summer?
Yeah, it's definitely more than just an uncomfortable day for everyone.
It really is. For pilots, extreme heat isn't just, a bit annoying. It's a serious operational challenge. It's this complex balance between human limits and the aircraft's absolute physical limits.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we're diving deep into understanding hot weather operations. We're using the Commercial Pilot's Handbook by Captain Ashutosh Chopra as our guide.
And our mission here really is to pull back the curtain, show you how these soaring temperatures affect, well, pretty much everything, from the pilot's own well-being right through to the nitty-gritty of aircraft performance numbers.
Right.
Hopefully you get a whole new appreciation for the incredible precision and planning that goes into every single flight when it's hot out. Understand those unseen complexities that keep things safe.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the most immediate thing, the bit we can all relate to, the physiological toll. How does that intense heat actually affect the pilot? Captain Chopra mentions it really cranks up fatigue and stress, makes pilots irritable.
Yeah, and it's more serious than just feeling a bit tired or, grumpy.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of fatigue, that stress, it can directly mess with a pilot's cognitive functions. It can lead to distraction, even a loss of situational awareness.
Which is obviously critical.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If your attention's compromised, your ability to react quickly and correctly, especially if something unexpected happens, it's reduced.
Yeah.
That's why the handbook really hammers home that pilots have got to prioritize being physically fit, properly rested, and well hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
And also actively shielding themselves from too much heat exposure, whenever they can. On the ground, in the cockpit, before the AC really gets going.
That makes total sense. A rested, cool pilot is definitely a safer pilot. But it's not just about the crew's comfort, is it? Captain Chopra also talks about the pilot's responsibility for passenger comfort.
Oh, definitely.
Especially on these really hot days. What kind of steps do they actually take to keep the cabin cool for everyone else?
Right. That responsibility kicks in even before you board. They're making sure the auxiliary power unit, the APU, is started early enough.
Okay.
To get the air conditioning going, pre-cool the aircraft.
Yeah.
They also make sure all the window shades are pulled down, keep non-essential doors closed, basically trap that cool air inside and keep the hot air out.
Smart. But what if, say, the APU isn't working? Maybe it's on the MEL, the minimum equipment list, waiting for repair. How do they stop the cabin turning into, an oven then?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it happens, it's a pretty common operational challenge.
I bet.
If the APU's out, they'll usually hook up external ground air conditioning units. Big hoses blowing cold air in.
Right, I've seen those.
They'll also try to minimize ground time before takeoff. Get moving and get airborne quicker where the air is cooler and the plane's own systems work better.
Okay.
Captain Chopra actually mentions that in these cases, just talking to the passengers early, explaining the situation, it goes a long way, helps manage expectations.
Communication, yeah.
And technically, they'll still use the aircraft's air conditioning packs, often cranked up to high flow, but maybe relying on engine bleed air once the engines start, or sometimes APU bleed if it's partly available. It's all about managing that heat buildup.
So these little things like hooking up external air or explaining a delay, they're actually pretty crucial for safety and comfort.
Absolutely. And it explains why sometimes you might board and find the cabin a bit warm before the AC really kicks in properly.
Right. Okay, so moving beyond the people, the aircraft itself obviously faces huge challenges when it gets really hot. How does heat fundamentally change its performance, even right back at the planning stage?
Oh, it's a massive factor. Huge. When they're getting the flight plan at dispatch, pilots have to be super conservative with the temperature they use for calculating the takeoff weight.
Why conservative?
Because the outside air temperature can, and often does, climb even higher by the time they actually get to the aircraft and are ready to push back.
Okay.
And here's a really subtle but critical point. The official temperature reading, usually taken in the shade, but the air actually going into the engines, that's often reflecting off blistering hot tarmac in direct sun. It can be substantially hotter than the official temp. And that difference, it really impacts engine performance.
Wow. So how do they account for that real-world difference, not just the number on the weather report?
They use a concept called density altitude. It's absolutely critical. Basically, hotter air is less dense, lower density.
Okay.
And density altitude is a way of expressing that. Think of it like this. For every degree Celsius, the temperature is above the standard average for that altitude.
The ISA International Standard Atmosphere.
Exactly, the ISA. For every degree above ISA, it's like your airport is effectively 120 feet higher up, aerodynamically speaking.
1 degree equals 120 feet higher.
Roughly, yes. So if it's, say, 10 degrees Celsius hotter than standard.
That's like taking off from an airport 1,200 feet higher.
Precisely. And thinner air means less lift from the wings, and crucially, less thrust from the engines.
Wow. Okay. That's a huge difference just from temperature. So what does that thinner, hotter air actually do to the engines? How does it affect their power?
Well, turbofan engines have something called a flat rating. Think of it as their maximum design power output, but only up to a certain outside air temperature.
Right.
Once the temperature goes above that flat rating limit, the engine simply cannot produce its maximum rated thrust anymore.
Yeah.
Its performance starts to drop off steadily.
Steadily deteriorating.
Yeah. And that has knock-on effects. It limits the maximum weight the aircraft can take off with. It reduces how quickly it accelerates down the runway. It means a longer ground roll is needed to get airborne.
It takes longer to lift off.
Exactly. And then, once it is airborne, the climb rate is significantly reduced. All of this forces pilots to meticulously review flap settings for takeoff, maybe use more flap than usual, and pay very close attention to clearing obstacles or terrain right after liftoff.
So it's not just the engine working harder, it's literally producing less power, less effectively because of the heat.
That's it in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just theory, right? It means those performance calculations become absolute critical, non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, something else to consider. A rejected takeoff, an RTO where they have to slam on the brakes before lifting off.
Right.
The energy the brakes have to absorb might become the limiting factor.
Yeah.
So brake cooling times suddenly become a really big deal in the planning.
Okay, so that explains why sometimes a fully loaded flight might need what seems like a ridiculously long runway on a hot day.
Exactly. Or why the pilot might choose a different flap setting than usual. It's all about balancing those performance numbers against the heat.
Let's focus on those brakes then. Seems like they take a real beating in hot weather. It's a component we probably don't think much about, but sounds crucial.
Oh, absolutely vital. Brake effectiveness, and especially managing the cumulative heat stress, is a major focus.
Cumulative heat.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But first, during the pre-flight walk-around, the pilot isn't just glancing at the tires. They're meticulously checking brake wear indicators, looking for any signs of overheating from the previous flight discoloration, maybe smells.
Right.
And adequate turnaround time between flights becomes essential. The brakes physically need time to cool down.
And if there isn't enough time? Or maybe they've done several short flights back to back?
That's exactly where this cumulative heat thing becomes a serious concern. Flying multiple short sectors, especially if the airports are also at high altitudes where the air is already thinner.
Right, adding another factor.
Yeah. The heat can just build up in the brake units. It might not exceed limits on any single landing, but the total retained heat can reach a point where you could get brake failures. Or maybe tire deflations, because the thermal fuse plugs melt, designed to prevent tire bursts.
Wow. Even if each landing seemed okay on its own.
Exactly. And this is where good airmanship comes in, that skill and judgment beyond just the rule book.
Okay.
Captain Chopra mentions pilots might sometimes consider extending the landing gear for a bit after takeoff, just flying with it down for a short period to let the airflow cool the brakes, or maybe extending it a bit earlier than usual on approach before landing.
Air cooling.
Air cooling, yeah. And of course, just taxiing for long distances on a hot tarmac adds a significant amount of heat to the brakes even before takeoff.
Okay, so they've managed the heat buildup during takeoff, climb, maybe the approach. What happens when the plane actually lands on a really hot runway? How do they manage the brakes then? Is it just about being gentle?
It's more strategic than just gentle. This is where some really subtle techniques come into play. First off, once the plane gets to the gate and the chocks are in place,
yeah,
the pilots absolutely must release the parking brakes as soon as possible. Don't just set them and forget them.
Why is that so important?
Because if the parking brake is set on already hot brakes, it traps the heat. The brakes can't radiate heat effectively, and their temperature can actually continue to rise even after stopping.
Seriously? Get hotter after stopping?
Yes. And the danger is real. Brake temps can climb high enough to melt those tire thermal plugs we mentioned, deflating the tire, or potentially cause the brakes to seize or lock up. And worst case, become a fire hazard if there's any spilled fuel or hydraulic fluid nearby.
Okay, that's scary. So how do they actively try to limit how much heat builds up during the landing roll and taxi-in?
Several tactics. They'll often use full thrust reversers after touchdown, Use the engines to slow down, reducing the workload on the brakes themselves.
Makes sense.
Using a larger flap setting for landing reduces the touchdown speed. Slower speed means less kinetic energy for the brakes to absorb.
Right, less energy equals less heat.
Precisely. They'll also typically select the lowest auto brake setting that's appropriate for the runway length available. Auto brake applies pressure smoothly and efficiently, minimizing heat generation compared to, say, panicked heavy manual braking.
Okay.
And here's a really counterintuitive one Captain Chopra points out. When taxiing short, firm applications of the brakes actually generate less overall temperature rise than trying to maintain a slow speed by constantly riding the brakes with light pressure.
So jabbing the brakes is better than dragging them.
For temperature management in this context, yes. Avoid riding the brakes. And another technique, maybe consider taxiing and using only one engine after landing, especially on a long taxiway. Less idle thrust means less need for braking.
Wow. These are really subtle, expert techniques, things you just never think about as a passenger.
Exactly. It's that deep understanding of the systems and physics, real airmanship managing heat in ways most people wouldn't imagine.
Okay, let's shift focus now towards the end of the flight, thinking about the destination airport and also preparing the aircraft for its next journey. You mentioned earlier that high temperatures at the destination can affect the departure.
Yes, it creates this interesting feedback loop in the planning. High temperatures forecasted at the destination can actually impose limits on the aircraft's landing weight, or more specifically, its ability to climb away safely if a go-around is needed on landing.
Ah, the go-around performance.
Exactly. So pilots need to ensure that even if they arrive when it's scorching hot, they'll still meet those minimum safety climb gradients if they have to abort the landing. And that calculation might mean they have to depart with less weight, less fuel, cargo, or passengers initially.
So planning has to look at the whole trip, end-to-end temperature-wise.
Absolutely. Which means thorough briefings and cross-checking all those performance calculations are, well, paramount. It all connects.
And do these hot conditions change actual in-flight procedures? Are there special checklists or rules just for hot weather?
Yes, definitely. Takeoffs, approaches, and landings on really hot days might demand specific supplementary procedures that aren't used every day. A key one is sometimes needing to perform these phases of flight with the engine bleeds off.
Bleeds off. You mentioned bleed air earlier for air conditioning.
Right. Bleed air is hot, compressed air taken from the engines. It powers systems like air conditioning and pressurization, but taking that bleed air reduces the engine's core thrust slightly.
Ah, so turning the bleeds off gives you maximum possible thrust.
Exactly. When performance is absolutely critical due to heat and maybe weight or altitude, turning the bleeds off temporarily squeezes out every last bit of performance. But it's a non-standard configuration.
And that sounds like it introduces risk if not done right.
Huge risk. Forgetting to configure the bleeds correctly after bleeds off takeoff can lead to pressurization problems climbing out. Forgetting the bleeds off procedure for landing, especially if you then have an engine failure during the go-around. Well, the consequences could be catastrophic because you wouldn't have the expected climb performance.
Wow.
It just highlights why rigid adherence to standard operating procedures, or SOPs, maintaining really high situational awareness, and good teamwork, confirmed through briefings, are absolutely non-negotiable in these conditions.
It really sounds like the pilot's job doesn't just end when they park the plane. They're thinking ahead for the next crew, too.
Very much so. It's all part of a continual cycle of safety and professionalism. For example, about 5 or 10 minutes before landing on a hot day, the crew might deliberately select the cabin temperature controls to be as cold as is reasonably acceptable.
Getting a head start on cooling for the ground.
Precisely. And then, before they actually leave the aircraft after parking, they'll make sure steps are taken to keep it cool for the next crew coming in. Making sure window shades are down, only essential doors are opened, checking that ground air conditioning is connected, and running if the APU isn't going to be left on.
So they're actively trying to reduce the workload and stress for the pilots coming after them.
Exactly. Handing over an aircraft that's already heat-soaked adds unnecessary pressure and workload to the next crew right at the start of their duty. Keeping it cool is part of ensuring a smooth, safe transition and maintaining consistent safety standards throughout the day's operations.
What an incredible deep dive this has been. We've really gone from, the pilot's personal well-being, how they cope with the heat, right through to the complex physics of density, altitude, engine limits, brake management.
Yeah.
It just underscores the immense knowledge, the precision, the sheer amount of calculation and thought that goes into every single flight, especially when the weather is extreme.
It really does. Safe flying in intense heat. isn't just about having a capable aircraft. It's this incredibly precise dance between human factors, very advanced calculations, and just meticulous, disciplined adherence to procedures. It's far more complex and demanding than I think most passengers realize.
Definitely gives you a new perspective. So here's a final thought to leave you with. As we see global temperatures continuing to rise, what challenges does that pose for the future? What kind of innovations might we need, maybe in aircraft design, new materials, or even operational rules to keep navigating our world safely in increasingly hot conditions? Something to think about until our next deep dive.